I just read Valis today, and primarily what I got from it is that excessive rationalization is detrimental. Well, okay, so it can manifest in psychosis because, well, you have an input that doesn't make sense basically, and you're trying to make sense out of it, so you're only going to come up with nonsense, as well, it's shown in the book really. I mean, it is kind of nonsense, but it makes sense as well if you interpret it in a certain way. Like, it kind of is very similar to some ideas I've had, but you know, in different words and different concepts, I suppose. Yeah, so I guess fundamentally nothing, well, things do make sense because cause and effect are good enough approximations that we see the products of those concepts day-to-day life, and largely in physics and all that stuff. But when you get down to fundamentals, then it's arbitrary, and a lot of things are arbitrary. Most things are. You just got to accept it, I suppose, and like trying to make sense of things is only going to end up in its own kind of absurdity. So I guess that's the main gist of it, or at least what I remember at the moment. Something kind of a little unrelated, but it's still a kind of realization that I've had tangentially to this. Time is literally the fourth dimension. Yes, you've heard that before. Yes, I know. How to put it? Well, say 3 dimensions are created by overlaying lots of 2D things. Like, I've got a cuboid now. So the fourth dimension is created by overlaying lots of 3D things, and if you conceive of different arrangements of space and then put them in a kind of array of every possible arrangement, then, well, when you move to the different elements, you're moving in time, because there is the idea that time is change, it measures change, and that's true. It's like in moving from one arrangement of space to another, you're moving in time, and it's misleading to call time because time is actually space, a kind of space. It's a space of space, in other words. Does that make sense? And then going back to Valis, he's saying, Horse Lover Fat is saying in his exegesis, how do you say that? Is that right? You know what it is. He's saying that we hypostatize information into objects. Rearrangement of objects is change in the content of the information. The message has changed. And space is essentially information. That's what fields are. Yeah, space is just, I guess, everywhere that is reached by a field. So it's a series of like connected points in a way. And space ends where no connection can be made. But that doesn't eliminate the possibility of there being, another section of space that isn't connected to this one. And that's potentially how multiple universes could exist. Though obviously the definition of universe might have to be changed a bit. Because obviously it wouldn't be everything, just everything that's possibly influenced by any action within that universe. Does that make sense? So if any movement I make, will influence everything else in this universe, but not in another universe. That's how I'll define it. Sorry, I just have to see if there's anything I'm missing. I had an idea of how, time travel could be conceptualized, just like traveling from one element of, the array to another one. But it would have to be to the past, because everything, in order to get to the future, lots has to change, and that can be very slow, and it'd be very hard to it's harder to create than to destroy. So traveling back in time is probably easier. So I think in order to get to the past, you probably have to destroy, all of the time periods in between now and the moment in the past that you want to get back to. So, and you wouldn't be able to remember any of what had not happened anymore, because remembering is kind of traveling in the fourth dimension, I guess. Yeah, so maybe memory is time travel in a way. Memory doesn't make much sense to me at the moment. I'm sorry, this probably sounds like nothing like what you wanted to hear. That's what you get. Yeah, it's a very interesting book, at least for me, because I could interpret it in ways that interest me by definition. Yeah, essentially it's commenting on the irrationality of the world, and they're kind of impossible to separate. They can't ignore each other because they both exist. And by creating a second personality, Philip K. Dick was trying to ignore it essentially, and couldn't because it was him. Yeah, I probably deviated from the book itself pretty far. Okay. Oh yeah, another idea. The self is the 4D part of the person, or the kind of component of an eigenvector of a person along the fourth dimension. fourth dimension being time. So it's the part of the person that's constant over time, because an eigenvector is, you know, an invariant line. Just a little nugget. Probably bullshit, don't know how that would work, but it makes sense. Oh yeah, on all the God stuff, like in the appendix, you can read that. Where is it? Right. For some time I had held the opinion that Zebra, as I called the entity which manifested itself to me in March 1974, was in fact the laminated totality of all my selves along the linear time axis. Zebra, or Valis, was the supratemporal expression of a given human being, and not a god, not unless the supratemporal expression of a given human being is what we actually mean by the term God. It is what we worship, without realizing it, when we worship God. So yeah, from there comes my eigenvector idea. So yeah, that's essentially what the supratemporal expression of a person would be. And this is consistent with Jung's idea that yeah, God is actually the self. But then it doesn't make sense to me why. Well, I suppose growing up is actually just, you know, all we can do. So it would make sense that the self would be so significant to us because it's all we have, but maybe it's an illusion, really. Because, you know, there's no really, at least for me, there's not that much consistency. And you can still be I, but you can have completely different perceptions with the help of substances. But it kind of, yeah, it makes the self even more questionable than it already was. Maybe, okay, maybe God is time, maybe there's no self, not inherently, it just appears that way. Time is immortal. Seconds count arrangements of space. How do we tell time? By arranging space, you know, like a clock. Clock's just when the second hand moves, that indicates a different arrangement of space. But then, if space isn't continuous, time can't be. So, atoms of time. But that is for another time. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about that. I have, in fact, read other books. Not that many. What have I read? Oh, I read like 3/4 of Savage Detectives, and well, at least it wasn't for me at that time, because I don't know, it just seemed really insignificant, and there were too many names. But you know, it was okay, I suppose. What else have I read? Oh, Gödel's Proof by Nagel and Newman. That's no, I'll talk about these later. And another one was Language, Truth and Logic. But I will tell you about those at a later date.